opinions, viewpoints, and promises made during the following program are not those of WHNZ AM, its staff, management, or parent company, iHeartMedia Incorporated. Welcome to the Business Happy Hour with your hosts, Frank Coto from Lincoln Lending Group, Ryan Pelky from TampaBay Plumbers, and Doug Ford with Suncoast Roofing Solutions. These three business owners will teach you how to work to live it up, not live to work. Now sit back, grab a cold one if you have one, and get ready for some serious business talk with three hilariously serious business owners. Now, your host of the Business Happy Hour, Frank Coto.
You are listening to the number one show for all things entrepreneurial and business advice, so stay tuned if you're ready for that. I'm the host of the Business Happy Hour, Frank Coto. I'm the owner of Lincoln Lending Group and 813 Mortgage. I'm joined in studio today, as always, with my incredible co-hosts, Ryan Pelky, owner of TampaBay Plumbers, and Doug Ford, owner of Suncoast Roofing Solutions. How are you guys doing this morning?
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You got your mic working this week, Doug?
It actually is. I don't have to stand. That's nice.
Last week, Doug had a Varia desk in studio, minus the Varia desk.
My headset's not working here, so I'm gonna be without it.
That's okay. We roll with the punches here at the Business Happy Hour. As all business owners know, nothing is perfect when you get in the office. Heck, half the times I get in my office and one of the computers is down, and I go from president to IT technician.
Your day is scheduled one way, and it shifts to another.
That's right.
Yeah, that's where I yield, because I've got a couple guys in the office that are tech savvy. I'm like, I don't even try to pretend to try.
See, that's why we have a show with three different business owners. Over here in my business, I end up being the garbage man and the tech guy sometimes. Ryan hires him, and Doug fires him. Right? All right, guys, so we are three successful business owners. Every week we're going to take time out of our busy days at 11 a.m. right here on 1250 WHNZ Live. And if you miss us here, you can find us on 970 WFLA bright and early Sunday mornings at 5 a.m. That is the number one show in that time slot on Sunday mornings. Or you can also catch our podcast. All you have to do is ask Alexa to play the Business Happy Hour podcast on iHeartRadio, and you can find us right there. Speaking of success, we are the three successful guys who are going to get together every day. We're going to tell you stories of our business, our entrepreneurship, our trials and tribulations, success and failures. And most shows, we're going to introduce you guys to a self-made businessman, many of which are going to be multimillionaires. Some of them are just going to be starting in business. Some of them are going to be success stories. Some of them are going to be failure stories. But each one of them is going to share their personal experience with us and with you as the listeners and give some advice. Speaking of advice, every show, in the last segment, we're going to give you guys the chance to learn something about business that you didn't know. We're going to give you what's called the Business Tip of the Week. We're going to come up with scenarios of both success and failures that we personally experience, and we're going to talk about it. Now, we encourage you as the listeners to call into the show, discuss your personal experiences, ask questions, contribute to the show, be one of us. So if you have somebody that you know who'd like to be part of the show, tell their story, be a guest, either on the phone or in person here in the studio, just go to bhhiheart@gmail.com. That is our email address, bhhiheart@gmail.com. And throughout the show, we're going to tell you how you can call in as well. So my co-host here, Ryan Pelky, is going to take us away with the opening monologue today as we start our show.
Hello, friends. On this National Day of Mourning, we wanted to start by taking a short moment of silence for the passing of a great American, George H.W. Bush. H.W. was a phenomenal father, husband, entrepreneur, and president. Some say H.W. was one of the last of a greatest generation, but did you know that he was also an entrepreneur? I was surprised to learn this myself. I never thought of H.W. of anything more than a politician, but as I dug into his story, I was amazed by the countless occasions in which he touched people's lives and persevered in ways that many people haven't even ever considered. H.W. Had the opportunity to work for his family business, which he would have almost been an easy shoe-in success. He took the hard route and moved away from his hometown, and got a job working for a company where he started sweeping the floors. Keep in mind that he had everything that he could have had everything handed right to him. He took the hard road. a road that we respect extremely much. We really respect here at the Business Happy Hour. In 1950, he gone into business for himself.
In 1950, he
something's wrong here.
Hold on. Now, did he go into business for himself? Hold on now.
No, in 1954, he went into business for himself, and he founded a Zapata offshore company. After he earned a fortune of his own, that's when he became active in the Republican Party. After 2 failed Senate bids, H.W. won a seat in the House and would eventually end up in the White House. Yes. One of the greatest presidents of all time was an entrepreneur. He gave up the opportunity to work at his father's company. Most of us would have never been given to have such an easy shoe in. So many of us would have taken that path and found failure at the end. The purpose of our radio show at the Business Happy Hour is to encourage you to take that dive and find your own process. All 4 of the business owners in this room would have. I'm having problems with my show here. We're going to go ahead and bring Frank Coto on so he can share his story. I apologize. I'm having some technical difficulties over here today.
That's okay, Ryan. All 4 of us in this room have been through so much in business, and that's what's so important about the show is that we have different perspectives of where we've come from and what we've done. And I was personally surprised to find out that George H.W. Bush was an entrepreneur. I had no clue about him. All we hear about is his political life.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely came from a privileged life as well. So, the trials and tribulations they face is incredible.
Right, and you even saying that, Doug, it is easier when you come from that. There's no
Absolutely.
question. Nobody can say it's not easier.
But didn't he start off like sweeping the
sweeping
floors
the floors, and he ended up becoming a bolt salesman. This
drill bit salesman.
Drill bit
I had
salesman.
that in my opening monologue. What happened was I kept getting people text messaging me. So from now on, I'm never going to keep anything in my phone. I can guarantee you that.
Use a piece of paper.
Yeah, I'm going to go back old school.
Tried and true.
Business tip of the week.
I got thrown off like 6 different times, so it got worse.
Technology is great. It's funny because people laugh at me because I have a paper calendar.
Right.
And they're like, why don't you go on Google? I'm like, tried and true.
Some of the best employees in my office still use a paper calendar.
Oh, it works for me because I'm driving and I schedule things when I'm driving half the time. So if I can't do that on Google, it's impossible.
It's better than texting and driving, right, Doug? You're just writing notes and driving? Is that what you're doing?
Exactly. Stop at a light.
There you go. Hey, at least he's safe about it. All right, guys. So my story, we talked a little bit about Ryan and Doug's in the last show, and mine goes all the way back to Florida State. When I was going to school with Ryan, we actually had a mutual fraternity brother, Nick Moon, and we're going to have him on the show one day. He owns a restaurant over in Melbourne, Seafood Station, and Nick was always the financial guy. And I don't know, Ryan, I'd say he's probably even a little smarter than you and I when it came to that type of stuff.
Yeah, always, yeah.
Always was, right?
Yeah.
And he was graduating a semester early, beat us to the punch on that as well. There you go.
Definitely beat me.
Yeah, definitely.
Everybody beat me.
Well, he beat me as well. But he knew that Tampa at the time, this was around 2000, was a thriving business market, and so he decided to come down here and find a job, and he's not from here. Came down with his business degree, tried to find employment in Tampa and wasn't having a lot of luck. So he gave me a call and he said, "Hey, I know you know a lot of people. Your family's from here. What do you advise I do?" And at the time, I had a family friend who owned a mortgage company since 1980, back during like the savings and loan scandal.
I was like 15, 16% mortgages.
Exactly, and that's part of the story. So he owned this mortgage company, and the boom was happening. I don't, most people listening, if they're a little bit older, they'll at least remember the late 90s. Rates were terribly high, and for the first time in decades, they were coming down. And when I mean coming down, they were coming down into the 7s and into the high 6s. But that was ridiculously good. So Nick called and he said, "Hey, I need a job. What can I do?" And I said, "Well, this family friend has been telling me to come become a mortgage broker when I'm out of school." And of course, my family's saying, "You don't want to be a mortgage broker. That's like a car salesman." Right? And I'm like, "Well, thanks, Dad." But, yeah, you eat those words, didn't you? But anyway, so he told me he wanted me to do that. Thought it'd be a good thing. Well, I told Nick, I said, "Hey, go talk to Paul. Okay, see if you can get a job." And it's math, and Nick liked math. So he went in and he checked it out, and I'll never forget it. About 2 months later, and I was another month or two away from graduating, he called me. And the first words out of his mouth, he goes, "They're blanking printing money down here." I'm like, "They're what?" He goes, "This business is unbelievable. They're printing money. You just walk in and you call people and you give them a loan and you get paid." And of course, he's out of college, so you're making like a couple grand. It's like you are rich, So with that said, Nick started into mortgages. He started doing it. I kept thinking to myself, growing up, the one thing that I never liked was math. I absolutely hated math. I was that guy in the class every time the teacher would talk about what we had to do and do our tests and say, "Hey, come on, teacher, why do I got to do that? I've got a calculator right here." Matter of fact, I was that kid, I'll admit it now, that I had a calculator watch. I had one of those Casio calculator watches when I was much younger.
You still have one, don't you?
Come on, Chris.
It's in his archive somewhere.
This guy's
It
jumping
is, right?
in right
Yeah.
here.
I haven't been introduced, but I have seen you, wear it a few times.
That's a good point. We never introduced our guest.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Really see how you guys are. Self-centered. Only think of yourselves. That's how it is. That's what entrepreneurship is, right?
It's all about. It's all about you. It's all about selfishness. That's right. No, it's not at all. But no, that's Chris Ariola. He's our guest on the show. We announced him a lot last week. We apologize for our technical difficulties. We didn't get him announced, but he's going to be having a lot of fun with us here. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back to my story, and I'm going to tell you how I got into business. You already know that I don't like math. You already know that I cheated on my test with the calculator watch. All right, so which I really didn't. But keep listening to the Business Happy Hour on 970 and 1250 WHNZ. And don't forget, if you want to find our podcast anytime, 24 hours a day, just download the iHeartMedia app and look for the Business Happy Hour podcast, or you can tune in live right there from the app, or you can ask Alexa to play the Business Happy Hour podcast anytime. You can listen to us right here live. So we'll be back in a minute on the Business Happy Hour. Welcome back to the show. Listening to the Business Happy Hour here live on 1250 WHNZ. You can also catch us on Sunday mornings on WFLA 970 at bright and early 5 a.m. Or maybe you've been up all night and you want to finish your night with a little bit of Business Happy Hour. Tune in then. So we're going to have in our next segment an incredible guest. I teased last week, he has one of the best business stories that I have personally ever heard. He's a guy who almost like George H.W., went from not sweeping the floors, but went from doing dishes to working his way up into one of the biggest restaurants in the world. And later in life, a very scary decision, he decided to give it all up, give up a very cushy corporate job and take a chance that most of us, many of us, are scared to take, and that's to become an entrepreneur and roll the dice to see how that's going to go. So a little later in the show, we're going to have Chris Areola. Chris Areola, the owner of On Swan Restaurant, with an incredible story of entrepreneurial success. Now, back to my own story here. We're going to pick up where we left off. I had given my fraternity brother, Nick Moon, some advice and told him somebody I knew in Tampa to go start the mortgage, go into the mortgage industry. Checked it out, told me he was printing money. Side note to business for everybody right now is, I'm sure you've heard the phrase. You guys heard it. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah,
right.
That's pretty much anything.
It's in everything.
That's life nowadays.
It's life nowadays, right? So
I think it's probably always been life.
It probably always has been life, you know, and that's it holds very true, okay? And a lot of us get our start that way, but that's not what makes you a success. That can give you a foot in the door, but that's not going to make you successful. Success is within yourself. So Nick started into the business, found some success, called me, told me to do it. I hated math. I joked, one of my teachers when I was younger said, I will never do anything in math, ever, never. So my parents were pushing me into being a pharmaceutical sales rep or an attorney or, oh, you got to be a doctor. You know, that was the thing back in the day, right? Everybody's got to be a doctor.
Yeah.
You got to be a doctor or an attorney or you're just a failure, okay? So thanks, Mom and Dad. So I come out of college. I start in with the mortgage thing that I had pushed Nick into doing. Found some success in that, and it was good. And I think this relates to a lot of business owners is you get into a business, you like it, you start doing what you're doing, but you realize that either A, you can do it better, or B, the people that you're working with are just not doing it right. Have you guys experienced that?
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly how I started my business.
Right. So that's a big drive. And sadly, for the guy I worked for, he's still a very good friend of mine. He made the choice to let us go. Nick and I and another guy went to him, a former partner of mine of Dan, and we basically said, "Hey, Paul, listen. You know, here's what we need to succeed. We're three young guys. We're hungry. We want to make money. We don't want to quit working with you. We love working with you, but we need processors. We need another computer. We need a printer. Pretty minor stuff when he thinks about business when we're making the guy money, right?" And Paul looked at us and said, "Yeah, I'm just, that's not where I'm going. I'm not going to spend that money. I'm not going to do that." So I was very honest with him, and I said, "Well, Paul, if you don't do that, then we're going to leave. We have no choice. We have to do this." And he literally looked at me and said, "That's okay. We'll still be friends."
Have you ever called him and said thanks for that, by the way?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that was a pretty pivotal moment. Had that gone, he said, "Okay, I'll spend $1,000 and buy some printers."
That was the
you
moment.
You might not have ever started Lincoln.
Ryan, that was the moment. That was it.
Where is he now?
So Paul doesn't have his company anymore. He dissolved it a few years ago, but he had it for, I would say, at least 20 some years. Paul's actually working for somebody else's mortgage company right now. So great guy. I love him. If you're listening, Paul, absolutely love you. I thank you very much for all the opportunity you gave me.
And for saying no.
And for saying no. and I think a lot of people realize that. So Paul was the driver. He said no, which lit the fire that was already stoked inside of me. And Nick and myself and Dan went on to work for another ladies' company, and she knew our vision, and she allowed us to start our company within her company. Okay, so don't be scared if you're out there in business. It's okay to take these steps.
Is that Tammy?
That's Tammy, which, funny story, Doug and I were saying, do you mention people that in your past and things like that? And he's like, well, I don't know if you give people's names. And so I mentioned this lady's name, and Doug's like, I used to work for her.
Yeah, that's crazy. When I first moved down to Florida, I was figuring out what I wanted to do. I was doing golf, and that failed. Then I got into car custom shop and sold that, got into real estate. And this woman, Tammy, gave me a job as a mortgage broker. I did it for a year, and I just didn't like it at all. But it was funny that
we worked for the same person.
Yeah, probably like a year apart.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
Small
world.
So I had the fire lit. Tammy let us do it. We still didn't own our own company, okay? We still had not really taken the dive.
What was the name of that one?
First Colonial Mortgage.
Okay.
First Colonial Mortgage. So we did that. Tammy's a great person. Well, at some point we had a disagreement with her managers. I don't think they liked that, we were trying to grow something inside the company. So one day they came to us and said, hey guys, we don't want you guys to be part of our company anymore. That was the true defining moment. That's when you could say I was kicked out on the street. And we had to make a choice, and that's when we started Lincoln Lending Group, first as a net branch of a company called Challenge Mortgage. If there's any mortgage people out there, you guys know exactly who Challenge Mortgage is. They helped countless mortgage brokers get started as net branches back in the day. But at that time, we took a major chance, knowing that 70 to 75% of all businesses fail in the first 12 months and 80% fail in the first couple of years. We went ahead and started Lincoln Lending Group right out of my condo extra bedroom. Now, I will take a side note to business. I had two partners at the time. And as Chris will go into his story later, it is easier, in my opinion, to start a business when you have partners. You've got help when you have partners. A lot of people don't have that help. So I started the company. We found success mostly because of the industry. The industry was very strong at that time. So it was easy to make money, and the mortgage company wasn't a very high-cost company, but we had learned what the other people had done wrong. We've been through these other two companies.
Is that 2001?
I would have been 2001, correct?
Okay.
2001 going into
11th?
2002. Yeah, well, was September 11th? Was that 99?
No, I think that was.
Was it
2001.
See, I'm terrible.
2001,
Yeah, so actually that would have been more like 2002 then.
So
2000.
yeah, because I remember Bush put in, what was it, the emergency fund rate of 2% at that time.
Yeah.
Dropped the rates down big time.
Yep, he did. So
That's what the housing
That's what
market
spurred
boomed.
our big great
Now, mind
great
you, the
recession.
housing market was already good at that time because rates were coming down, so it was opening up people to refinancing that could not refinance. There was no reason or benefit to refi. When he did that, that's when the equity started going up, values started going up in the industry. We did have some tough times, and I've got more to the story I can tell you guys later, but basically going into business, I was forced into business by a person saying that they didn't want to grow with me, and then another person forced me out of her business and left me with a choice. And I could have easily just gone and started a company with somebody else.
So, Frank, understanding that story and realizing that you were put to that challenge, did you feel like you weren't capable of doing it, or did it just encourage you more?
It definitely encouraged me, Chris, and this is something that I want to get to when we come back into your story as well. I was encouraged. I had a fire lit, and I felt almost forced, and I felt like I didn't want to give up at that point. And I was tired of working for other people, and that was a big thing. So, guys, we're going to be back in just a minute on the Business Happy Hour. We're going to have Chris Ariola, an incredible story of the rise to the top. Please stay tuned and listen to that. And don't forget, in the fourth segment, the Business Tip of the Week. We'll be back in just a minute. Hey guys, welcome back to the Business Happy Hour. I hope you're enjoying the show. I've been telling my story of how I got into business, and now we know I'm a mortgage broker at this point, so I'm going to cut off my story there because we have such a good guest. I don't want to take up any more time. As promised last week, we have brought in Chris Areola. He is the current owner of On Swan Restaurant, and Chris has an incredible story, and one of my favorite parts about his story is how he took this risk at such a late point in his life, and in my opinion, it made it a bigger risk. My risk was very small because I was young. I had no kids. I wasn't even married at the time, and I had 2 partners. Chris, on the other hand, is going to tell us a story that's absolutely incredible about a late in life success story and a risk. Without further ado, Chris Areola.
Oh, well, thanks everyone for letting me barge in on your first show. But like Frank was talking about, I think all of our stories can last for about 3 hours if we really want to talk about it, because it is a journey, and the journey, as I always say, I think starts at a young age, but, always I played sports growing up, was always competitive, always had that mindset, and went to college, Florida State as well, and was one of those types of kids that was thinking, what the hell am I going to do after this, right? And so everyone was graduating, all my roommates, and at the point that they were, figured I can't graduate, I can't leave college, I gotta go on to some more school. So, call my parents up, and very fortunate. My parents were very supportive of a lot of the things that I did. And at that point, when I was in college, I was fortunate that I didn't have to work like many people do in college. And so I was trying to figure out, how do I keep this salary going for a while? And so I called my parents and said, I want to go to culinary school. And they said, listen, Chris, that's not happening. And at that point, I figured to myself, well, I got to figure this. I got to talk to them more about it. Well, make a long story short, they said, no, not happening. And so my mom basically said to me, Chris, you need to go get a job in the restaurant. You've never worked in the restaurant before, let alone if this is what you want to do for the rest of your life. You just need to understand what it is if you want to put the investment into it. So a buddy of mine worked at Outback Steakhouse, and Outback had just opened. This was like in 1995. There was about 300 Outbacks out there, and Outback was booming. And so at that point, I got a job, and I went, coat and tie, interviewed, didn't know what to look like, and show up. And partner says, applying for a server job, sir? And I said, no, actually a kitchen job. And he said to me, well, we only have one shift a week that we're looking to fill. And I said, I'll take it. And he looked at me and he said, how the heck are you going to make any money? I said, don't worry about that. I said, let me tell you my story. And so he said, listen, if you want to work that one shift, you're more than welcome to start working. He says, the worst position of the kitchen, but it's all yours. And I said, well, what's that position? And he said, well, it's the bloom station. And I said, okay. He says, you're going to be making bloomin' onions. He said, you ever had a bloomin' onion? I said, who hasn't had a bloomin' onion? Right. I was excited that I was going to make the bloomin' onion.
A lot better to eat than to prepare.
Right. And so he was just looking at me thinking, God, this kid doesn't know what the hell he's getting himself into. So I started, and the culture was incredible. The people were incredible. And I didn't mind making a bloomin' onion, but what I realized very quickly was that there was a turnover of positions. And so I looked at it and viewed it as the attrition of growth, in the sense that someone's going to leave and I'm going to take their position. And at the point of realizing that there was a salad station, there was a fry station, there was a saute station, and the grill station was obviously the person working the grill made the most money. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to meet the salad guy because that's the next person in line. I figured out that person was probably not going to last for a little bit. So I was like, hey, why don't you teach me how to work the salad station? Well, sure enough, that guy doesn't show up. I jump over there, and partner looks. He says, you know how to work the salad station? Oh, yeah, I know how to work the salad station. So next thing I know, I get more shifts. Well, that ends up happening, and I end up going all the way down to the grill station. And that's within literally about 4 months of working with Outback. Wow. And quickly it was just realizing what was next. Well, I remember calling my parents and telling them, and I think that they were in a position where they were thinking I was going to quit, But I'll be honest, it was just such a great environment, a lot of teamwork, a lot of culture, and a lot of opportunities. And so the opportunity presented where I could go open a restaurant. And Outback at that time was opening about 75 restaurants a year.
Wow.
And at the point that they were looking for people who, had this drive, had good sense of what the culture was, but more importantly, were very passionate about training and developing, and also too just kind of being free to do anything. And so here I was still in school, and I took the summer off, and I told my parents I was going to open up a restaurant. And so that was an exciting experience, and I opened the restaurant. Well, being that you open the restaurant, you get to meet the founders because they go and they visit the restaurant. Well, I got to meet one of them, who was Trudy Cooper, and she was in charge of training. And she was just very, just a sweet lady. And at that point, she pulled me aside and she says, Outback's going to be expanding internationally. And she said, you'd be a great fit for the international group because I speak Spanish fluently. And at that opening, I was speaking Spanish with some of the people. And so all of a sudden, I get a phone call 2 months later, and Outback was opening their first location in Seoul, Korea. And so I call my parents up, and I said, hey, you won't believe it. From the Bloom guy to now I'm going to Seoul, Korea. And I said, but there's a little problem here. And my parents kind of paused for a second. Well, that trip was going to be happening during the fall semester of college, and I was supposed to be graduating in the springtime of college. And when I read about H.W. Bush and realize what he did, at 18 years old, they called him Bush 41 for a reason, because when the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, he decided that he wasn't going to go to college. He was going to actually enlist himself into the Navy and become the youngest aviator of time. So, you talk about entrepreneurship, it's that drive that you have at a young age. And so so I told my parents, I said, listen, I want to do this. They said, Chris, you got to graduate from college. And I said, I'll go back to college. I said, this is a lifetime opportunity. Well, at that point, from that moment on, I never went back to college. I continued to proceed. I joined the international group, developed restaurants in 22 different countries around the world, ran an Outback Steakhouse, got promoted to become the partner in Portugal, and then came back to the States, joined Bonefish, spent 14 years with Bonefish Grill, and eventually became the vice president for strategic integration and development. And so at that point, here I was about 42 years of age, and I thought to myself, I've been working for the same organization for over 20 years. And at that point, I figured I'm still young. I still have a lot of energy. I have a tremendous amount of experience. I'm still that hungry kid. Why not go and make that chance, that risk of doing something that I've always dreamed of doing, but more importantly, partnering up. And so,
but at this point, Chris, though, you've got a family, you've got kids, you've got a job that's paying you great, you've got stocks, you've got everything, and you're going to take that risk right now.
You know what? I honestly, that didn't even cross. Yes, I had lots of conversations with family members, my financial advisor, but I got to honestly say the financial side of where I wanted to go and the decision that I wanted to make was not even in the cards of viewing it. It was just knowing that I was prepared, and I spent 20 years doing something that I was very passionate about and doing it very well, that at the point of realizing if I could connect with some great partners, that, we could do the same exact thing. Yes, obviously the end goal is, the financial success of it.
Right.
But I think the financial piece of it is the reward that you gain out of the passion that you have of something that you really want to put your life into.
I mean, Outback really perfected the process of, expanding. So obviously you got great knowledge.
Yeah, I say I probably opened over 300 restaurants between Outback International, and Bonefish Grill. Oh. And so, to open a restaurant and the systems, yes, it's very simple. The people side of this business, and any business that you all are in, I think is the most critical.
And how do you typically hire your people? I mean, I know that's the hardest part for almost all of us. So.
Well, and I think that's the big question, right? We can all come up with the greatest ideas, but I think the mojo is in your people. And I think my beliefs, what my values are, I'm looking to find people who have, kind of that same belief, like-minded, so to speak.
absolutely.
Right. And so interviewing, I don't necessarily interview people of the job. I interview the person of their personality. Who are they? Right.
So what did you do? You left Bonefish and you picked up some partners, and you guys decided to go right into the restaurant.
Yeah, so so two of my partners are mentors of mine that have been mentors for the past 20 years, and I had always said that one day I would continue on my own, and they retired early, and I stayed, and then we continued to keep talking. I said, look, you guys can't be retired at this point. Let's start something. So we partnered up with a local chef, Chris Pont, and his wife, Michelle Pont, who Chris has been a successful restaurateur here in the Clearwater, Pinellas County with Cafe Pont.
Yeah, it's a great restaurant.
Yeah, and at that point, we started on Swan, and it has been such an incredible ride.
All right, well, let's take a break there, Chris, and then let you pick up on the rest of your story here in just a minute. When we get back from the break, I want to hear what it took for you to get the restaurant open. I know Ryan and Doug and I all have some questions for you, because the one thing that you guys have is you have a culture. And I understand that you learned the importance of culture as coming up through the restaurant industry, through Bloomin' Brands, Bonefish, and Outback. And the one thing that I can say about On Swan is it has a culture that's different than any other restaurant that you walk into. And I think a lot of our listeners can learn from that, from your experiences and hiring the right people. You're listening to the Business Happy Hour on 970 WFLA if you're Sunday morning, or live right now on HNZ every Wednesday at 11 o'clock. We'll be back in just a minute with the business tip of the week and more from Chris Areola of On Swan Restaurant. Back to the Business Happy Hour. Hope you guys are enjoying the show. I know I am. I'm hearing this story from Chris Ariola, the current owner of On Swan. And honestly, Chris, I cannot believe that you walked away. And I've known you for a long time, and we consulted about this. But I told you I thought it was a good move. It was a risk. You took the risk, and you succeeded. And I think part of the reason that you succeeded is because you knew what it was going to take to do this, and you knew that it had a lot to do with your employees and your culture. And we say a lot of times on the Business Happy Hour that your employees are the blood of your company. So tell us some of your thoughts. I mean, you took this risk, you made it, you had partners. That's always a good way to go. First question Doug had asked is, what does it take? How do you know how to hire people? We've already asked you why did you leave there? So.
I mean, the restaurant industry, the turnover is tremendous. So it's always got to be tough to hire people.
So I spent a good portion of my career as a vice president for development and training for Bonefish, and was responsible to take Bonefish from 4 restaurants that was locally grown here to the point that we were going to expand it nationwide. And so taking it from 4 restaurants to 200 restaurants, you had to find a way to motivate your people, right?
It's like Outback was like really your proving ground.
Right.
They taught you everything you know to become successful in today.
It was. And so, it all started with culture. And, when you realize that you now have to motivate 13,000 people, and you know that you can motivate them, you can think to yourself, all right, if I open a restaurant and I've got 100 people and I'm there, I think I can motivate them too, right? So you build the confidence in just the way that the approach of motivating, inspiring people, and I think that's the message, right? Is that inspiring our people, giving people the opportunity, believing in people, and allowing people to have the autonomy to make some decisions, right?
So who inspired you the most?
There's a lot of people. I have a lot of mentors. Whenever I talk to people that are business entrepreneurs, I really engage in conversation just because I think ultimately they have something to share. But my partners, John and Trudy Cooper, are 2 who inspired me the most, believed in me the most, gave me the chance. And at that point, it's when you know that you have the confidence and you believe in yourself and you got leaders that believe in you, the confidence level just becomes stronger.
It's that much easier.
It's easier, right? So, Frank, to your question, it's just, I think for us in what we've done or what I've done with On Swan, and you and I have had this conversation, is just you look at the workforce in the restaurant business, you got 3 different generations. You've got the millennial generation, you got the Xers, and you got the boomer, right? And so 3 different generations working. So how do you work with all 3 different generations? And a lot of times people say, well, one generation is better than the other generation. Look, we're all people. And at the end of the day, we want an opportunity to grow. We want an opportunity to make more money. And we want people around us to respect us, period. And at that point, if you can provide an opportunity for them to give that to your people, and they do their part, then it's great success. And I always say that I have 3 promises to my people: clear direction, unwavering support, superb preparation, and a sense of belonging. And at that point, if I can provide those to my people, then in turn, I think they can provide me teamwork, self-responsibility, and own the experience. Because it's a 2-way streak here. And at the point that they're not doing their part, as a leader, I'm going to do everything on my part. And so that was the model that I learned in my past that worked consistently with 180 restaurants that we developed. And so you just bring the playbook, no different than a professional football coach and a baseball coach, and you bring it over and you apply it. And so...
And they applied it to numerous restaurants.
And
proved it successful for sure.
Well, one thing that I think sets your new restaurant On Swan apart, and the neat thing is you took all this stuff and you took all the stuff and you applied this knowledge into your new restaurant in your own way, though. And I see a difference in the culture in your restaurant than what I see in every other restaurant that I go to. And I know we don't have time because we got to get to the business tip here in the show. It goes so fast. But I'd like to ask you if we're going to have a show in the next few weeks focused mostly on the millennial generation and millennials in the workforce and what's the difference of them. And Chris has a very interesting point of view on millennials because he works so well with them. He's found a lot of us think they're not good workers. Chris will be the first to look you in the eye and say, no way. They are the best generation. And we've talked about this on the show. We don't have time to go into it right now, but if you will do it, I'd like to have you back on or even on the phone and talk about how you work with these different generations and what are the benefits of these newer generations of, we call them kids, but they're not. They just have different needs than we do. Is that something you can do for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say they're the smartest generation of this day. But, I think ultimately the way that you look at, your employees, if you look at them as your employees, you're going to treat them as an employee. But if you look at them as your people, as your family, as someone that you really want to, invest in, you're gonna treat them a different way. So people want to be recognized. People want a little extra cash during the holidays. What better feeling to walk up to the grill guy and hand him a $20 bill and say, hey, you know what? You're doing a great job. Those are things that don't happen. So,
well, thanks for telling us that, Chris. And Chris, thank you for coming on the show. I know it's
my
gone
pleasure.
so fast.
Thank you.
We've had a great time with you, and we're definitely going to have you on. So I don't want to leave you guys without the business tip of the week. Doug's actually going to mention the business tip of the week this week, but I'll read a quick quote from George W. Bush that goes right along with it. And it's, some people do lie all the time, some political people, and they step over their friend to achieve the objective themselves. But I'm one who believes that one's word of honor is about one of the most fundamentally important things there is. Doug?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny that we brought this up because it's something that I live and die by as well. Is that in business, your reputation is everything. You live and die by your word. And one of my slogans is Suncoast Roofing Solutions, where honesty, integrity, and craftsmanship come first. Right. So it's something I truly believe in.
So the business tip of the week for you guys is you have one reputation in life. You have only one, and you have your word and your integrity. Don't mess it up. If you destroy that, you're effectively going to destroy your business.
Yep.
So, Doug, who's our guest going to be next week?
Next week we have Nicole Stokes. She's a managing director at
Northwestern
Mutual.
Yep.
So she's basically opening up her own branch, and she's becoming, I guess, a managing partner here soon.
That's great.
She's up for an award?
She's up for Businesswoman of the Year.
She's an honoree for Businesswoman of the Year for 2018.
That's
Beautiful.
Right.
That's great.
Businesswoman of the Year. So we're going to have Nicole Stokes. Is that right?
Yes.
Nicole Stokes next week. So you guys stay tuned for that. And it's going to be a great show. Chris, again, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a great time.
Hey, Frank, I'm going to throw one thing out there.
What's that?
We're opening a new restaurant in Armature Works come
Really?
2019, Euro-American style, so Okinola.
All right, Okinola is the name of the restaurant. It's at Armature Works. If you haven't figured out where that is, you better Google it. It's the hottest new area in Tampa Bay. Chris, thank you for coming on the Business Happy Hour.
The proceeding was a paid program, paid for by Lincoln Lending S Corp. The opinions, viewpoints,